human beings, Power Gamer here. Can someone please explain to me why saying I want to be like a guy who wears leather clothing and always carries a whip? Never mind, I can understand why my first grade teacher was concerned.
Indiana Jones, the only man who can rock a fedora. One of the most iconic film series of all time, Indiana Jones has cemented himself as one of the most beloved characters in all of cinema, despite all the ups and downs. With the movies being such a big hit and filled with lots of action, it's only natural that there would be a bunch of video games dating all the way back to the Atari 2600. But those games didn't look like they were made of plastic, did they? Lego Indiana Jones was the big one. The previous games varied wildly in terms of quality, but this one was a gem.
Man, this takes me back. This game was an essential part of my childhood. I may have missed out on Lego Star Wars as a young kid, but Lego Indiana Jones was my jam. This was one of the 5 games I got when I first got my Wii when I was only 5 years old, and I absolutely loved it. So much so that I even dressed up as Indiana Jones for Halloween. But surprisingly, I didn't end up seeing the movies until very recently. I don't know what took me so long, but now that I finally have, and with Dial of Destiny's recent release, which was something, I think it's time I finally revisit this childhood classic. But first, let's see where it came from.
After the success of LEGO Star Wars, Traveler's Tales began working on a pseudo-sequel that kept the gameplay elements but incorporated them into another major franchise. Indiana Jones was decided, both because it's also owned by Lucasfilm and both games were published by LucasArts, and as a way of promoting the then-upcoming Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And since this game was developed around the same time as the complete saga, they were able to include a trailer for it in that game. Interestingly, the game was originally reported to have 4-player co-op, but they ended up keeping it to 2 like previously. The game was released for the Wii, PS2, PS3, Xbox 360, and PC on June 3rd, 2008, alongside a DS version that was basically a completely different game, under the title of LEGO Indiana Jones: The Original Adventures. It was a huge hit, selling over 11 million copies, which was more than the first 2 LEGO Star Wars games separately, but not as much as the complete saga. And while it got very positive reception, many people considered it a downgrade from before, with some even calling it the exact same game, just not as good. Regardless, the game was followed up with a direct sequel titled LEGO Indiana Jones 2: The Adventure Continues, released the following year.
Despite me playing the hell out of this game as a kid, I've never actually gone back and done a full replay of it. Is it as good as I remember, or does it seem inferior to the other LEGO games? Let's find out.
The game follows the stories of the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, which follow Indiana Jones, an archaeologist set on finding the world's greatest treasures to preserve them in a museum and prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. You can watch the films themselves if you want the full picture, but here I'll just give you the quick versions. Raiders of the Lost Ark. In 1936, after finding an ancient idol statue in South America and being forced to hand it over to a Nazi spy named Belloc, Indy sets out on a quest to find the Ark of the Covenant and prevent Belloc from getting his hands on that, and he ends up being joined by Marion, the daughter of his old mentor. Temple of Doom. In 1935, after an incident with Chinese crime bosses in Shanghai, Indy winds up in an Indian village with an American lounge singer named Willie and a Chinese orphan boy named Short Round, and they have to help the village people by reclaiming their stolen crystals from a mysterious cult. And The Last Crusade. In 1938, when Indy's father Henry goes missing, he embarks on a quest to find him, which leads to a search for the Holy Grail alongside his assistant Marcus Brody and Austrian archaeologist Dr. Eliza Schneider. Much like LEGO Star Wars, the story is told with no dialogue. Characters will merely grunt and use body movements to express what's happening. And because Indiana Jones isn't as plot-heavy as Star Wars, it feels a bit more straightforward. There's again a comedic tone set to it, but it feels a bit downplayed from before. It's still there, but I wouldn't say there are as many funny moments as last time. But there are some really great jokes in here, and some random Star Wars cameos, because this game was published by LucasArts. As a whole, the presentation is on par with before. Much less of the environments look like they're made of Legos, but the graphics are overall solid, and the music is a good blend of original pieces and stuff from the movies.
You'd think switching to a completely different franchise in a completely different genre would drastically affect the gameplay, but you'd be surprised that... Sorry, I had something cut in my throat there. You'd be surprised that this game is very similar to LEGO Star Wars, just with a few tweaks.
It's a puzzle platformer with a vast selection of characters to play as, and heavy emphasis on exploring and finding various collectibles that require use of each character's special skills. Almost everything is interactable in some way. Breaking things causes studs to appear, which act as currency, and you can build things out of spare LEGO pieces you find lying around. But unlike LEGO Star Wars, where there was a large amount of characters that could each do things other ones couldn't, here character-specific abilities have been kinda downplayed. The most important one is obviously Indiana Jones and his trusty whip. The whip is the item you'll be using the most in this game. Its primary use is on these wooden panels that allow you to swing across large gaps, grab things from a distance, and destroy stuff. It can also be used as a weapon, but it's not always the best option since it takes a full second to use. And since you can only take 4 hits before dying, a lot of the time you're better off just punching. But it can be fun to see the various ways Indy can kill enemies with it, and with the female characters, he can even score some action.
Spicy.
The other characters' abilities are dependent on what item they hold. That was the case in LEGO Star Wars, but unlike that game, almost every object can be found and picked up by any character. So a lot of the time you'll be using items that a character only has temporarily, as opposed to LEGO Star Wars where they could only use a lightsaber or a blaster. They couldn't use both. The three main items are shovels, which let you dig things up, wrenches, which let you fix broken machines, and books, which let you solve hieroglyphic puzzles. You just need to match the pattern of whichever icons flash. These items are found in almost every level, so there aren't as many collectibles tied to one specific type of character. We also have keys, which you can insert into these things, but no one has these organically. You have to find them lying around. However, there are still a handful of things that only certain characters can do. The only thing brought back from before is small characters entering these doors to access new areas. The new ones are characters with turbans can activate these statues to move things, and ones with soldier hats can knock on these doors and be let into places without being blown up. You can get hats from defeated enemies, but they aren't very common, so most of the time you'll need to be in free play mode to do this, especially with the statues. The only other new ability class is that female characters are more agile, apparently, so they can jump higher than males. I don't know if that qualifies as sexism.
Aside from Indiana's whip, the only character with a special ability that no one else has is Willy, and it's the one thing that she does best. Screaming. They knew what they were doing.
Even then, the screaming is only used like 2 times to shatter glass. Still more use than she had in the movie, though. The amount of collectibles has also been shortened a bit. Sorry, that was weird. There's only 3 types of collectibles this time instead of 5. The gold bricks and blue mini-kits have been removed, as well as extra mo, but that didn't really add much, and the gold bricks were just stuff you got for getting other collectibles, so I can live with that. There's no bonus levels either, but yeah, that's not a huge deal. The other ones return, but they were all slightly changed. Instead of the mini-kits, we have these treasure chests, and they do the exact same thing, only they build artifacts instead of spaceships, so they're more on theme. Also more on theme is the stub meter, which is now called True Adventure, and maybe it's just me, but I found it a lot easier to get these than in the last game. I got all of them except 1 on my first try, and instead of the red bricks, we have parcels for the extras. While they accomplish the same goal, they work very differently. You don't just grab it and then you're good. You have to pick it up and carry it over to one of these mailboxes. Only when you place it inside do you finally unlock it. Yeah, I have no idea why they did this. I guess to put more of an emphasis on using characters in different levels, because in LEGO Star Wars, there was a handful of red bricks I found on my first run. Here, I don't think it's possible to get a single one of these when you're not in free play mode, since you either need it to get the parcel or to get to the mailbox. If you can only reach one, too bad, you can't get it. And the extras do the same thing. Some change the gameplay, but most are cosmetic.
The biggest expansion with this game over LEGO Star Wars is the hub world. It is much bigger than it was back then.
The hub world is Barnett College, the school Indy teaches at when he's not treasure hunting. Instead of walking into doors, you select a level by going up to one of these maps. Honestly, that's fine by me, since it makes it a bit more simple. This place is a lot larger than Mos Eisley Cantina, but the primary reason is because there everything was condensed into just one menu. Here, if you want to do stuff like buying characters and rewatching cutscenes, you have to go into completely separate rooms. There's the main hall where you select the stages, the library where you can buy characters, the mailroom where you can purchase extras, the theater where you can rewatch cutscenes, the classroom where you can enter codes, the artifact room where your artifacts are displayed, the courtyard, which is just an extra path, the art room where you can make custom characters, and Indy's office. Indy's office has a small puzzle where you have to use a variety of abilities to build this box. If you then break it, you get a key which you can take up to the artifact room, and it appears to do nothing. I can see people finding this annoying, but I really like how expansive the college is, since it can be fun to just screw around in it. Plus, it's not hard to get into the actual levels.
Since the Something weird is going on here. Whatever. Since the items aren't as character-specific as before, we have a lot more weapons in this game that can be used by almost everyone.
We've got plenty of melee weapons like spears, swords, and torches, okay, that's more of a tool, but whatever, and some ranged weapons like pistols, shotguns, bombs, machine guns, crossbows, and even bazookas, which, fun fact, were not invented until the 1940s. Melee weapons are kept until you either grab a new weapon or throw it away, but ranged weapons are temporary. You only get a handful of shots with each one, so you need to be careful with when you use them and try not to waste them on smashing random objects. The combat overall has gotten a bit of a downgrade, with the primary issue being that enemies with ranged weapons can be really annoying since no one you use in story mode has a ranged weapon by default. The ones you find are temporary, and unlike LEGO Star Wars, there's no way to deflect the shots. Your primary method of defense is punching or hitting enemies with your tool, and there are no power-ups either. Combine that with stuff like the bazookas, which kill you instantly, and can cause you to kill yourself if you're too close to the enemy when you shoot them, be prepared to die a lot. But there are some neat things you can do, like use Indy's whip to steal enemy weapons, or even hide in bushes. This is completely pointless, but it's also hilarious.
This game puts a heavier emphasis on the puzzles, so we have a bit more variety in that department.
This game heavily amplifies needing multiple characters to do one action. That was a thing in LEGO Star Wars, but here it's a lot more common, so if you don't have a friend, you'll be switching between characters a lot. Thankfully, the AI for them is fairly solid, so you only have a couple of moments where they jump away when you don't want them to. Stay on the stupid rope! But you can always get your revenge by intentionally killing them. Sucker. There's also a larger emphasis on picking things up and carrying them. And you know how each movie had a scene with a bunch of small, gross animals? Here, each of those moments has one character afraid of that animal, so you have to scare them off with a torch. Otherwise, they just won't move. You've got Indy with snakes, Willy with bugs, and Elsa with rats. Of course, I've gone this far without talking about free play mode, which works exactly the same as before. You unlock it after beating a level on story mode and can use any character in the game, with more being chosen at random, and all of the cutscenes are skipped. You get characters with every ability you have unlocked and can cycle through them with the push of a button. Thankfully, it again adds a lot more variety to the game and makes replaying levels more fun since you can see the characters in situations they wouldn't normally be in. Plus, this is the only way to use your custom characters, and this is the one I came up with. Skeleton in a turban with a bazooka named Widgnab71. Perfect. And all custom characters have the whip, so you don't actually need Indy when you select them. This game doesn't have any vehicle levels, but I didn't like most of them, so I'm okay with that.
With this being based on 3 movies instead of 6, we have half the levels that we had in the complete saga, but since that was basically 2 games in 1, it's not as much of a downgrade as you'd think.
We start with Raiders of the Lost Ark, aka the first one. Level 1 is the Lost Temple. Indy leads an excursion into the jungle to find a golden idol, but all of his companions die except for a native named Satipo. It's a great introduction to the game's mechanics, and we all know how iconic and beloved the opening scene of the movie is, so it's really fun to play it. Indy snatches the idol, the temple starts to collapse, and we get an homage to the famous boulder chase from Crash Bandicoot. The two escape, but Satipo betrays Indy by siding with Belloc.
Well, that's not what happened in the movie.
Indy hands over the idol and tries to sneak away with Jock, but Belloc sicks a bunch of tribesmen at him. Jock fixes up the plane, flies Indy home, and we never see him again. Level 2, Into the Mountains. Indy learns the Nazis are after the Ark, so he heads to find Marion, who holds a special medallion that can help him, but they're attacked by Major Tot, our first boss fight. You have to fight him in Marion's bar by throwing stuff at him, since he runs away if you try and get near him. He sets the place on fire, and you have to do the same thing to a guy with a machine gun, and then punch Tot again before running outside. Make your way through the snow and blow up a truck to reach Level 3, City of Danger. You arrive in Egypt and have to trade bananas with monkeys to get things, and they even recreate the best scene in the movie. Marion gets kidnapped, though, so Indy is forced to team up with his friend Sarah. The Well of Souls. They use the medallion to find the Ark's location, and hop inside only to find it's filled with snakes. The last 2 levels weren't that great, but this one has a really good atmosphere and some pretty creative puzzles, although it can go on a little too long. You find the Ark and have it hauled up, only for Sarah to get captured and Marion to be dropped down in with you. The 2 of them escape and reach Level 5, Pursuing the Ark. Make your way through the Nazis' desert base, and we get another boss fight against this muscular dude. You can't hurt him with direct attacks, so you need to pick up an anvil and make him punch it, which hurts his hand. Do this 3 times, and he gets planed.
I love how they work around the gore. What the hell was that?
They fight some enemies on trucks and get the Ark back before loading it onto a ship where it gets stolen. The final level is Opening the Ark. Indy disguises himself, and he and Marion escape the ship to pursue Belloc and his troops. You have to complete this button puzzle that I never actually figured out as a kid. I just messed around with it until it worked. You finally track the Nazis down, and Indy threatens to blow up the Ark, but can't go through with it. Boss time. Fend off the waves of Nazi soldiers as you try and reach Belloc. Yeah, that's the only real challenge of this fight, trying to reach him. He doesn't actually do anything. Once you knock him out, Indy and Marion still get captured, and these German idiots decide it's a good idea to open the Ark. This releases a bunch of spirits which blow them up.
Not entirely what happened.
The Ark slams closed, and the story ends with Indy and Marion returning home to spend a lovely night together as the Ark is stored safely by the army in a random warehouse. I'm sure that won't cause any issues down the line. Next is Temple of Doom, aka the worst one, Shanghai Showdown. Indy tries to make a deal with some mob bosses but gets poisoned, so you have to use Willy to grab these diamonds and throw them to the gangsters to make them drop the antidote. Once Indy's cured, grab a sword, knock down this giant circle, and use it to smash through the window where you find Short Round. And this is the first level where we have more than 2 characters. Fix up Short Round's car, drive through here, and fix up this plane that's owned by the gangsters. The pilots bail, so the 3 escape by jumping out of the plane in a raft, one of the 2 most impractical things Indiana Jones will ever do. Pankot secrets, they wind up in India and learn about the village's missing stones. So they travel to a nearby palace, I am amazed they kept this scene in here, and venture inside this cavern to find a bunch of spiders. Aside from the spider pit, the level's pretty uninteresting, but you do get to ride some elephants, so that's fun, and this is one of the few times in a video game you can play as a 10-year-old slicing people up with a sword. They find the cults led by the evil Mola Ram performing a human sacrifice. Or not sacrifice.
Ah, come on, you couldn't have made it a little more accurate to the movie?
Level 3, the Temple of Kali. Willy gets captured and is about to be sacrificed, so Indy and Short Round have to save her. And much like in LEGO Star Wars, this is a moment where the game derives from the source material to make sure there's 2 characters. Willy is put in this chamber to be lowered into a fire pit, so you have to pull these 2 levers to bring her back up. Don't worry, there's no time limit, so she can afford to get a little tan. Then this dude shows up, and you have to find him by stealing these guys' hats and activating these statues to open fire chambers. Get Willy out of the chamber and enter Level 4, Free the Slaves. This time, Short Round gets captured and is forced to work in the mines along with the village children who have been made into slaves. slaves. This level's nothing special, aside from a few moments where you break the kids out of cages. It ends with a boss fight against this thuggy dude, and you can't actually kill him because the palace Maharaja keeps throwing potions that heal him. So you need to break out Short Round, have him chase him off, and then throw bombs at the thuggy while he's holding boulders until he gets crushed by this thing. Escape the mines, the closest thing we have to a vehicle level. You have to ride in these mine carts and hit switches to change tracks and open exits. And this is by far the shortest level in the game. I finished this whole thing in like 15 minutes. And finally, battle on the bridge. After making your way up this cliffside, you face off against Mola Ram and his thugs. He sends minions at you and then jumps away, so you have to hit him and then throw swords at these things on the side. Once you break them all, the bridge collapses and Mola Ram falls into the river where he's eaten by crocodiles. The story ends with the children and stones being returned to the village and Short Round spraying Indian Willie with elephant water. And now we finally have the last crusade, aka the best one. Level 1, the hunt for Sir Richard. I thought that was Indy's father's name as a kid. Henry Jones mails Indy his diary full of info on the Holy Grail when he gets murdered, kidnapped. Indy and Brody learn about this from a businessman named Walter Donovan, who sends them to Venice where they meet Elsa. The three make their way into a library, and after building this giant X and spinning around a staircase that I remember taking ages when my brother and I first played this, you drop a chandelier into the X, revealing a hole. Brody's too scared to enter, so Indy and Elsa head into the catacombs and trudge through water and rats before finding Sir Richard's tomb. Brody is knocked out by a man named Chasm, who sets the tomb ablaze, but Indy and Elsa escape, and you have to fight him by punching him, which causes him to jump into a boat that you have to ram. They almost get made into chums, so Chasm tells Indy where Henry is. Castle rescue. Indy and Elsa sneak in and manage to find Henry, but Elsa snatches the diary, revealing that both her and Walter are working with the Nazis.
I knew you couldn't trust the blonde ones.
They get tied up, but escape by lighting the room on fire. I like how they recreated the movie moments, but this level is kinda disappointing since the last one was much more fun. You fight the castle keeper with just a few blows, grab a bazooka, and escape. Motorcycle chase. This level sucks. You have to ride these motorcycles that can be a pain to steer, and the last two areas have enemies that never stop spawning. And the second group has freaking bazookas that kill you in one hit. I hated this level, and it was the only one I didn't get True Adventurer on. The two make a detour to get Henry's diary back and board a Zeppelin to find the Grail. Trouble in the sky. They get busted and fight a bunch of Nazis, even throwing one out the window. He should have had his ticket. The Zeppelin turns around, so they sneak out via a plane with no tail and crash. The majority of this level is just walking along a beach, and it also has areas with infinite enemies. In the end, you have to fight off 3 planes by causing seagulls to fly into them. Funny, but it gets old, and the last group can be hard to find. We're almost done here. Desert and bush. Indy and Henry meet up with Sarah, remember him, and he helps Indy fight off some Nazis while Henry takes a nap. You have to fight this guy in a tank by avoiding his shots and building mines so that when he drives next to them, they explode. Then do some more platforming while he shoots at you. That's fun. We get another truck chase like in Raiders, and the gang arrives at the final level in the game, Temple of the Grail. Indy, Henry, Brody, and Sarah all make their way into the temple where they're confronted by Walter and Elsa. Walter shoots Henry. Okay, that is hilarious. So Indy has to disarm the traps and find the Grail. This is by far the hardest level in the game, as a large amount of the traps will kill you instantly, but they do a good job of recreating the ones in the movie. You have to avoid a bunch of blades, jump on letters in the correct order, and walk on invisible paths. Indy reaches the final room, and Walter tries to find the Grail. Thankfully, this game keeps at least one brutal death from the movies.
He chose poorly.
You then have to pick a Grail while the knight attacks you and you can't fight back, so sadly this game doesn't really have a final boss. I hope you saw the movie, because otherwise you would probably have no idea what to do here. Choose wisely and bring the Grail back to this fountain. Indy takes it to heal Henry, and Elsa tries to steal it as the temple collapses, killing her. The story ends with the 4 gentlemen riding off into the sunset, knowing that the Grail will never be stolen. And that's the end of the game. Although there are a couple of secrets like before. We have a trailer for the next LEGO game, with this one being LEGO Batman.
Your time will come, my friend.
And some extra characters, but to unlock them you need to get all the hidden Star Wars characters and collect every artifact in the game. No thanks, I'm good.
Jones is a fun time. I'm really glad I was able to revisit one of my favorite games from my childhood. But looking at it critically, it doesn't do that much more than LEGO Star Wars, and I would say that is overall the better experience. I can understand why people would find it underwhelming compared to its predecessor, but it will always hold a special place in my heart. If you're a massive Indiana Jones fan, or you just have a copy collecting dust, I would still recommend giving it a shot. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it's still pretty fun. Okay, seriously, what the hell is going on here? Fabio?
Yeah, I'm back.
What do you want?
Well, seeing how I've been running